Welcome to the Web Platform Podcast, a developer discussion that dives deep into all things web. We discuss topics relevant to developing for the modern web and the web platform of today, tomorrow, and beyond.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Web Platform Podcast. Episode number 144. Today we're talking about Vaadin, UI components for web apps. We are your hosts today, Justin Ribeiro, Leon Revel, Amal Hussein. Hello, wonderful people. How's it going?
Hi.
Hi, everyone.
Hello there.
And before we get started and introduce our guest this week, I'm going to throw it over to Leon, who's going to talk about This Week in the Web in 2 minutes or less. Leon.
Thank you, Justin. So first up, VueJS 2.5.3 has been released, which includes a nice list of bug fixes. There's been another pre-release of Babel 7, that's beta 31. Apple has also recently put forward a proposal for HTML Template Instantiation, which is going to allow developers to instantiate HTML templates with variable content in a very similar way to how Angular templating works with curly braces. So it'll be interesting to see a standardized way of doing that. TPAC 2017 happened last week, where lots of people from W3C Working groups and other committees get together face-to-face to talk about the web platform. So it'll be interesting to see what came out of those discussions. And I thought it'd be nice to finish this week in web with some shout-outs to upcoming conferences. So first of all, we've got DotJS, which is in Paris, France on the 30th of November. Then there's FrontConf in Munich, Germany on the 8th of December, and the Rich Web Experience in Florida, United States on the 5th of December. So if you're in those areas or heading out to those areas, don't forget to check out those conferences. So that's everything from me for This Week in Web. Thank you, Justin.
Thank you, Leon. Some good stuff there. The Apple proposal for HTML template instantiation is... I think that blew Twitter up, at least from a web perspective. I don't know anyone who wasn't surprised and going, like just generally. Like there was just, it was amazing.
Yeah, but it's something that, we tend to do a lot, and it'd be really good to just get a standard way of doing it. I don't know that much about the actual proposal itself, but it'd just be nice to, stop having all these thousands of different ways of doing it. So I'm looking forward to seeing what comes out of that.
Yeah, it should be exciting. It'll be interesting to see just kind of what kind of feedback it comes back through, particularly since it dropped before TPAC, so I know it came up there as well. But we're not here to talk about templates. Well, we can talk about templates, sure, but today we have a wonderful guest today with us to talk about Vaadin, UI components and things. Amal, do you want to introduce our guest? I know you guys go back sometime.
Yeah. So, hi, everyone. I'm really excited to introduce Amahdy here today. He works at Vaadin. He's a developer advocate and also globetrotter like me. So Amahdy and I seem to run into each other at a bunch of conferences or, just random places. And it's like, oh, you're going to be there too? Oh, cool. And so just to be clear, I live in Boston. He lives in Finland, in maybe not the most fun part of Scandinavia, very dark part of Scandinavia this time of year. So we're happy to have you. Hello, Amahdy.
Hi there.
Hi. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what your background is, and what's your story? How did you end up at Vaadin?
So I'm happy here in Finland, first of all. It's not like that dark. But previously I used to be a software engineer. I used to work for Oracle and some other companies before. And I used to be a customer of Vaadin back in the days. And then after a few years, they contacted me about some job opportunities. And then I ended up relocating to Vaadin. And that was my brief story. Right now, I'm a developer advocate for Vaadin, and we have several kind of developer advocates. So we have product developer advocates, like for elements only or for framework only, and so on. But I'm kind of like a mix of both. So I don't have like a specific product. I'm interested in everything. I'm interested in technology as well, and web technologies in specific. That's why I'm also a Google developer expert in web technologies.
That is super cool. And so one thing I love about Vaadin is your logo. It's this beautiful deer, but it's also very mysterious. So can you once and for all settle what is Vaadin? Maybe what's behind the logo, and then also, just what is Vaadin?
So Vaadin has been in business for almost 16 years now. We've been busy with web development in general and developing web applications on the front end, especially. The story about the logo is because the Vaadin is originally a Finnish company, or the HQ is in Finland. So they decided to give it like some kind of Finnish theme. And here in Finland, there are two languages. There is the Finnish language, which is the official language, and there is another language called the Sam language. And in the Sam language, a female reindeer of 3 years old is called Vaadin. So that is the story behind the name. And actually, you're going to find that many parts of the framework and of the elements as well are named after some Sam languages, like Valo theme, for example. So Valo means light in Finnish. So they are trying to like just put some Finnish touch in some parts of the company. Recently, so in 2009, I guess, Vaadin started to make a big revolution in the framework and started to migrate to GWT. So migrating all the UI components to be rebuilt and rewritten completely with GWT, which is back in time was a big buzz, and it made a big change in the way how people are looking at Vaadin. But recently we decided to make one more buzz, which is again migrating our UI components to web components, Polymer-based web components. There are many reasons behind that. We're not abandoning GWT by any means. There is a very long article explaining what we are doing exactly. We are just expanding our interest. So basically, previously when we were using GWT, we were targeting only Java developers. And we have seen a lot of people interested in our components, but cannot use it because it's completely based on Java. So that's basically what we decided to do. We decided to make them available and possible for other users who are using any other framework or JavaScript or Angular and so on to use our components. So that is the story about Vaadin elements. It started approximately 2 years ago. Now we have a big set of approximately 50 elements, along with many Google Polymer-based elements that also work side by side with our elements very nicely.
That's an awesome story. Thank you for the background. So, can you elaborate just for our listeners? What is GWT, but also what was Vaadin always a company that just produced reusable UI components, to use as a framework, or I guess was that kind of the inception behind Vaadin, or is Vaadin a company that happened to be really good at this thing, and then you decided to focus on that primarily?
Okay, good question. So GWT actually stands for Google Web Toolkit, which is a tool that was started by Google to basically convert Java code into JavaScript. It was designed mainly so that people can write their UI part into Java, which is back in time was the most statically typed language and stable language and so on. Now I know that there is a competitor like TypeScript, but let's focus on the topic. So that was the big reason why GWT has appeared. And basically the whole idea was to build the front end with Java. And of course it has to be transferred and compiled into JavaScript, because JavaScript at the end of the day is the language of the browser, isn't it? So that has been our approach for many, many years, and up till now, actually, by the way, and this is one part of our business. But we also wanted to have our components available for all other frameworks. So we found that Web Components is the standard that is showing a strong presence now, and is doing better in many other frameworks, and it's attracting attention by many developers. That's why we decided to also make our components available as web components. Both of them are managed completely by Vaadin, so there is no division in the company in that sense. We are just making our elements available separately outside of the framework. The whole idea is if you want to use our UI components, you can use it with any other framework you want. Otherwise, if you have a Java backend, then probably our framework is your best bet.
So Web Components obviously fit the bill really nicely there with the technology to use to create the reusable components. But why did you choose Polymer? Or maybe a better question is it just Polymer components, or are there also vanilla components as well?
Right now, because when we started this 2 years ago, most of browsers didn't support web components yet. So we needed to find a solution that has something that can overcome this problem, which is the polyfill basically in Polymer. We started at the beginning to make everything Polymer based, and it worked nicely for us. Even though right now we are just in assessing the situation right now, are we going to be depending fully on Polymer, or are we going to just be vanilla web components? We're trying as much as possible to be vanilla web components. Maybe we're gonna still have to use polyfill for the time being and maybe for the next 2-3 years till we see stability in the market and modern browsers, majority of modern browsers in the market share, so that we can trust that our components can work independently without Polymer. We are not throwing Polymer as well. We're just using some of its capability, but at the same time, we don't want to make the user bound to a specific technology or a specific library. So it's a standard. We are following the standard regardless of the tool or the library that is available in the market.
That's pretty cool. And so essentially, there's this Java piece. Just so I'm summarizing. So there's there's a whole Java framework, and the value proposition behind Vaadin is allowing folks that are maybe not the JavaScript or front end experts to be able to leverage these really cool reusable components, without having to really understand how they work under the hood. Is that correct?
Yes. So basically, for Java people, we got your back. This is our business for more than 15 years now. But yeah, our components, as I said, they are completely available for non-Java users as well.
Yeah, the GWT story, from Vaadin's standpoint, the GWT story was quite compelling for a long time. There's still a very big conference about GWT and everything else. And even now, be the fact that the web components integration with that side, it gives a set of developers who are still somewhat separated from the web the ability to use newer standards across the board, which I think is very interesting. From a developer standpoint, as someone who uses Vaadin's web components for things these days, particularly things like your guys' grid or your data table stuff, these are not, they're definitely web components in a different target, for a different target audience. We're not talking about buttons per se. We're talking about things that from an enterprise stack standpoint, these are really components designed for those kind of markets. Would you say that's a fair representation?
Yes, that's completely true. So we actually started with those heavy components like grid, upload, drag and drop upload, and combo box, which is not a simple component because you need a search and filter and those kind of things. And then later on, we started to add very simple components like button and like label and those kind of very simple stuff. And the reason was because we wanted to provide a better model of writing web components that are themable. So we found some issues with theming Polymer-based components. They are kind of having the paper style built inside them, and it was a little bit hard for enterprise users to theme them. That's why we decided to build another offering for those people who trust our elements and like to keep using our set.
Yeah, I'm actually super interested. So, I mean, like the theming problem is like a very interesting one around the reusable component space in general, whether, they're web components or React components, or, and so I'm really curious, like about like, how Vaadin has handled theming and the theming strategy, because you have these reusable components that anybody can use that are open source, but your enterprise clients, I'm sure add their own custom CSS and whatnot. So I guess how do you handle theming in Vaadin with Vaadin web components?
All right, that's a very good question. So actually, I'm not involved inside the team who is building the elements. So I don't know exactly how they are doing it. I know only the top of the iceberg. But I can just give you an overview. So basically, we have something called Value Theme Engine, which is right now on version 2.0, that is basically intended to theme web components. We provide a separate file that you need to include inside your HTML file for the theme. And then we provide some kind of default theming with some variables that you can modify to change the whole look and feel. We also come with a default two themes that are light and dark, just to give you an overview about the contrast and how to theme over all the components. So yeah, that was basically the big idea behind our basic set of elements that we have built, because we have seen a lot of people who were struggling using, for example, paper button and paper notification and those kind of basic elements with theming, with a deep enterprise level theming. Also, nevertheless, we have provided our set of elements with paper theming, so that those people who want to stay with the paper material design, they can still use our elements in a material design theming way. So to summarize, we have three default theming. We have the material design, and we have the dark theme and the light theme. The dark and light theme is the way to go if you want to make deep customization. Also, this is completely new for me, but I heard from the product manager of the elements that soon in Polymer 3, they are going to probably support the library that is called Part Theme in Polymer Labs. So if you go to GitHub in Polymer Labs, you're going to find something called Part Theme project. It's talking about some kind of advanced way of theming your elements in Polymer 3. And this is more or less probably is going to be the way to go for us as well, since our elements are right now on the way to migration to Polymer 3 as well.
So I've got a quick question in relation to styling, etc. Do all of the Vaadin elements utilize the shadow DOM on the platforms that support it, obviously? And how does that affect styling?
Yeah, so as I said previously, I don't know exactly in deep details how this is working inside the elements itself, because I'm not part of the team who is building this. I just have a scratch overview about how the theming work.
Okay, no problem. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, that's maybe that's a good follow-up question though. So I have a question, just maybe a clarification question. So there's a harness that you give your customers, and they use that harness, that index HTML harness that you give them to help them leverage the theming. Is that correct?
Yes. So this is basically how to specifically theme our Vaadin elements using this specific file, I would say.
That's pretty cool. And so I really would love to get into the elements, but maybe before we get into that, it's worth it to discuss your open source model. So So are many of the Vaadin beautifully styled, awesome functionality components are open source. Is that correct?
That is correct. All of them are open source Apache 2.0 licensed, except a very little set of them that this is basically how we make money. They are licensed under commercial license.
That's super cool. And can you talk a little bit about for you, our listeners that are maybe less familiar with Vaadin elements? Can you tell us a little bit about what types of elements you can get with Vaadin, because they're pretty cool?
Sure. So we have those basic elements like button, checkbox, combo box, and so on. Context menu. We have a little bit more interesting elements like grid, data grid with a lot of functionalities. We have splitter. We have upload, which is my personal favorite. It's a drag and drop multi-file upload tool. I think all the basic elements, we have got them covered, like dialog, text field, ready buttons, and so on. And then on the commercial side, we have the charts element, which is basically for data visualization. We have also a spreadsheet. It's similar to Google Spreadsheet, except that you can own it yourself and do everything yourself. And we have something called board, which is a way to develop very quickly a responsive dashboard application without really caring about setting rules for responsiveness and so on. You just place the elements next to each other and the board will do the magic.
Yeah, the grid one is the one that I use quite a bit because we do, a fair amount of enterprisey sort of things. And grid is, admittedly, I was always shocked that y'all released grid as sort of like one of the first ones. It was a smash and started releasing web components when you're going, let's just take on the thing that is hard for everyone. Because grids are not particularly kind. And the nature of the Vaadin group is actually really easy to declaratively wire. Like if you ever wanted a grid that did quite a bit of work and not have to deal a lot with things, yeah, I quite enjoy the fact that I don't have to sit there and rebind stacks of JavaScript just to get the grid up. You can get a grid up that's very performant very quickly, and I think that was quite a risky thing to do, but you all seem to pull it off without any issue at all. What kind of components do you guys sort of have in the pipeline? Like, when you tackle the hard ones at that point, everything seems pretty simple coming down the pipe. But are you guys working on anything new that's kind of coming in the element train of things?
I actually, first of all, thank you for this nice feedback about the grid, especially that it's an open source and free. It's not commercial, so it's very nice to hear that people love it. But about the pipeline, I actually don't have any information about a publicly available element that is going to be available next. So I don't know, but I don't have any word to say at this moment. Regarding grid again, I would love to add a small thing. So grid has been actually one of the most interesting thing here at Vaadin because it has a long story. It started as a component called table. It was Java based only, of course, and it was really, really interesting. I don't want to get started, but it was like one of the very old components in our set, and it has been rewritten and improved millions of times. Well, not millions, of course, but I'm trying to elaborate how much we have dealt with this table component and how much we got experience over the years on how to exactly create such a data visualization component. And then later on, we decided to rewrite the table component and rename it to grid so that we tell our community that we have changed it. We have changed everything. It's no longer table. It's something different. And when we came with grid, we ported it to a web component, and then things started from there. So we have seen a good interest from many people in the component, but at the same time, we have seen a lot of report about performance issues and some debuggability issues because the JavaScript file that was shipped with the grid was a little bit obfuscated and hard to debug and hard to patch as well. So we rewrote the grid for the third time, and we made a huge improvement to make sure that, first of all, the JavaScript file and everything is written under the Web Component standards, and also to make sure that the performance comes first and works perfectly on mobile devices and all these kind of things. So yeah, grid.
Yeah, it actually uses the mix-in pattern fairly deeply now too, in terms of the last rewrite, which for a lot of other components hasn't really happened yet, which I think is very interesting. When you guys were using mix-ins across the board, as you guys started to refactor out to sort of make it a little easier to sort of debug and things, I mean, did you guys run into issues with that? I mean, because we're talking about, we're not talking like one mix-in here. I mean, the grid's probably got at least, a dozen, if not 10 or so, thereabouts. Did you guys run into issues with that?
Yeah, so we're basically modernizing our components all the time. So that's basically the way to go. And you can see it clearly in grid at this point, yes.
So with all these components, I mean, the ones you created so far look absolutely amazing. Like the date picker in particular. I mean, date pickers, there's a million of them on the internet, but the one that you guys have created is absolutely amazing. How do you prioritize what to kind of do next? How do you figure out what's the most needed, what's the most used? Do you have any information on that?
We have a very active community and the voice of community. We have two big channels from which we can hear from community, which is Gitter channel on GitHub. Are you familiar with Gitter?
Yes, I've used it before.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's kind of chat where our community get to chat with our experts that are building the components right away and give the feedback. This is one way, and the other way, which is the forum, where people sometimes go there and ask open questions, and then also some of our experts or other experts in the community that are not working for Vaadin, they give some answers. So based on those, we have some people here who analyze those and figure out what is the most demanded functionality or feature or even component that we should focus on it next. Of course, we also do some market research, and sometimes we make surveys and interview very special like customers and maybe some special old customers also of ours. We interview them to see what their demands are and what they want to have next. So based on all of that, we figure and decide what is the most demanded component and what is needed to be implemented next for our set of components.
It's really cool to hear that you kind of gather that information directly from the community. Do you have any kind of beta program or anything like that as well?
Beta program.
As in, so you've figured out what new components to create. You create the first early versions of them, and then you can give them to the community to get initial feedback, see how they work, see what features might be added, or what things don't work quite right.
So we have something similar. It's early access program, but as far as I know, it's right now not applicable on Vaadin elements. We run this early access program with some of our customers and some of our community, active community people, but probably we're gonna expand it soon to also include some of our Vaadin elements users, so that we get some early feedback on our components.
Cool, that'd be really good.
Yeah, I want to be part of a Vaadin Alpha Club or something like that. So Amahdy, I actually I wanted to ask you about if you could talk a little bit about the behavior components. So one of the things I noticed is there's these really cool elements around drag and drop or grid, for example. Are you, I guess, Can you talk a little bit about the business decisions behind like open sourcing and making those types of behavior elements? Like, I think they're super cool and useful, and it feels like no one ever has to make another drag and drop anything. They can just use your component.
I'm actually so happy to hear those nice feedbacks. But what do you suggest? Should we close source them? Or?
No. I meant like in terms of marketing them. Like, I mean, I don't know if people, if they're not familiar with Vaadin, I don't know if they're going to be familiar with some of those behavior elements and the fact that they don't need to reinvent them. That's all.
I think one of the power of Vaadin since many years is the open sourceness. So being open source and close to the community was one of the biggest things that made Vaadin what it is right now. So we're not planning to change that anytime soon. And we're planning to keep producing open source components. But just to be like clear, we need to make money at some point. That's why we keep some little very tough components that we think that they are not going to be used except by enterprise level users. We keep them on the commercial side. Chart components, exceptionally, we had to make them commercial because they are based on a third-party library. So they are not purely written from scratches by us. But maybe we are going to also make it possible for other free charts libraries to be wrapped under Vaadin elements as well. That's something maybe might happen in the future. I don't know. But other than that, like we believe that enterprise users might use those very specific high-level components. That's why we're making them commercial. Otherwise, all our components are going to stay open source. Does that like align with your question, or?
Yes, that answers my question perfectly. Thank you so much. I think, I'm interested to hear about what some of your challenges are with being such early adopters of web components as a standard. So do you have any stories to share around some of the challenges, around that, as well as potentially some lessons learned for, using web components at scale? For applications that are, so widely used?
I can say that it feels great. So actually, back in time when we started to move to web components, that was a big risk because web components were not known in the market. And we just decided to make a challenge. We decided to invest in web components because we believed in them. Back in time, when I used to go to conferences and ask people, do you know what is web components? Nobody answers. Have you ever heard about Polymer? Nobody answers. So that was a really big challenge. But to share with you a story, so a few months ago, I was at Copenhagen for Polymer Summit. And we found out that almost most of the people over there, approximately, 600 or 700 people, most of them know Vaadin elements and are already using it. So early adoption led to big community expansion, and now we're popular in the web component market, and we're gaining a big community vibe, which is basically what makes Vaadin. So we're built on community. So that was a big success story. I even myself sometimes meet some people who tell me, I'm using Vaadin grade. I recommend that you use it as well. I was like, yes, I actually accidentally use it forcefully because I work for Vaadin. So, I keep facing those nice situations where people are recommending, for example, Vaadin elements to each others and stuff like that. That's just because we adopted web components early enough in the market, and we took this bet early enough.
Super cool. Thank you so much. Like that's an awesome story. And I think the really cool thing is that these components they're well tested, well supported. Is it easy for developers to migrate? Like, are there versions of components that I'm sure they get versioned, right? Is it easy for them to migrate? Is it backwards compatible? How does that work?
You mean versions between the same
Yes.
component itself? Some yes, some no. So the grid component, for example, is not straightforward to migrate. But some other components that were built recently are easy to migrate. Nevertheless, we provide extensive documentation, and we try to answer as many questions as possible in the forums about migration issues, just to make it easy for people to migrate. We're also trying to follow Polymer lead right now. So once Polymer announced version 3.0, we jumped ahead quickly. And actually, on the same day when they announced Polymer 3.0, we had many components in alpha phase available, or like proof of concept available under Polymer 3.0 as well. And then we provide like distinct differences between what to do, how to migrate. In many cases, it might be as simple as same as migration from Polymer 2 to Polymer 3. And in some little cases, there might be some changes in APIs as well, which is, again, well documented in the release notes.
How do you have any information on how the testing process for all these different elements? How do you make sure that they're of really high quality, which they obviously are?
Thank you. So basically, we have this mobile first testing strategy. We build for mobile first before anything else, which is give us some assurance that what we build works perfectly on mobile devices. And then if it works on mobile, then we are pretty sure that it's going to work on desktop. That's one of the things that we adopt here at Vaadin. One more thing, we also run a continuous integration testing just to make sure that nothing fails whenever we push a commit or make any modification or something like that. We have we're trying to follow all the latest testing libraries available for web components in the market, because this is something modern, and there are many approaches right now. There is no final say on how to do it right or do it wrong, but we are trying to build our own model on how things work. You can check our GitHub, like the core elements, Vaadin core elements, to see a list of Travis CLI test suite, the result of the test, and how they look like on each element separately, and you get to see and familiarize yourself with how we do every single element testing separately.
Brilliant. We'll make sure we put that link in the show notes so other people can check it out. Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
So you had mentioned, and I've seen the branches and for some of the alpha stuff that you guys have going on for Polymer 3. Have you all started to have the conversation of how that sort of affects your strategy of delivery? Because I'm curious, because there is quite a bit of chatter of the move from Bower into NPM. Do you guys, have you started to see some of that as you've started to work towards, this sort of newer paradigm where publishing is going to change for your web components?
We are definitely going to move away from Bower to NPM. And this is on the way right now, but it turned out that it's not that easy. There is some dependencies and some work to do to get things done. But yeah, to answer your question, we are going to move away from Bower.
Yeah, it seems to be, I get this question quite a bit, is how can I easily move my thing into it? And I don't particularly have a good answer for that at the moment. Are you guys currently also kind of dealing with, obviously the Polymer team has Polymer Modulizer now, which sort of deals with the move to JS modules as well. Have you guys started to use those new tools as well, or are you guys working on different tools?
This is actually how we started the first time ever. So when we got some of our elements in a work in process phase, we used Polymer tools. And most probably we are going to follow the Polymer way, because probably it's the safest way for now till we get a stable release, and then we definitely gonna share our stories. But yeah, I strongly, myself at least, I believe in the modularizer. It's pretty cool, but probably not work perfectly. So let's see how it goes.
Yeah, it's definitely a work in progress. If you're out there listening, it's all the Polymer 3 thing is very much still a work in progress as kinks are being worked out, which should, I would not move your production things to Polymer 3 right this very moment yet, folks. If you're out there listening.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really curious to see how Polymer 4 going to be released next year. But on the other side, also this is on my personal note, I really like the idea of JavaScript modules, and I think this put things in a correct way finally. So to solve the HTML imports problems and solve the whole ecosystem problem between browsers and stuff like that. So I'm really looking forward to get this on a final release finally and see things modularized finally.
Yeah, with dynamic imports sort of starting to land, this becomes, I think, something that, at least from if you're used to the import href side of life on Polymer, that is now possible within the JS module side of life too. So you still get the purple pattern approach that, that it's not Polymer specific at this point. It's just an approach that you can use in most frameworks and libraries these days. But with dynamic import, I think it'll be very interesting. I think the tooling ideally will hopefully become slightly easier. Because HTML imports, I mean, I loved them. Like I was really hoping people would get on board with it, but the tooling was always very difficult to deal with as well.
Yeah, right. And also browser vendors didn't accept it, so there must be a move away. I personally liked how we could write HTML clearly and directly in the old way, the HTML imports way. But I'm looking forward also for a similar approach to be available soon in the ES modules.
Yeah, I agreed. I'm personally excited about the ES module. I was in that base camp, so I'm very excited about that. I have one burning question for you, Amahdy. Are you ready for it?
Go ahead.
Is that are Vaadin UX and UI designers available for hire? you guys have the best team. Like honestly, you should go high five all of them when you're back in the office tomorrow.
I'll make sure to send them this high five tomorrow.
You should. So I have a personal question. I haven't looked at the source code yet, but how do you guys handle unit testing? Is there full unit test coverage for all these different components as well?
Yeah, we're as I explained earlier, we're making continuous integration testing, and we have whenever any commit is pushed, we go to Travis and it goes over the test units and perform all the tests immediately. But also to answer your perfect question, so we have the so-called services in our company, and this is basically if someone wants some help related to our components or whatever related to Vaadin, then we can provide this service for them. So yes, our UX and UI guys are available to help you build or improve your web application already. Yes, the answer is yes.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm glad I asked.
But it's related to Vaadin.
Oh, okay, I'm glad I asked. And I think Leon had a question about accessibility. Did you want to take that one?
Yes, just a kind of a basic question, really. Do Vaadin elements work with screen readers and all that kind of nice stuff?
I'm actually quite surprised myself when I do run the tests of Lighthouse and see that the accessibility score is always the highest on Vaadin. So those people are taking accessibility really seriously, and they are following every single thing of the book on all the elements. I quite of many times I try to run those lighthouse tests on some of the demo test tools that we have, and I get a lot of nice score like 93, 94 on the accessibility score, which is always the highest.
That's brilliant to hear.
Are you
cool?
Lighthouse.
Yeah, I mean, that's really great, especially because they're so widely used, so that's really awesome to hear that. That's great impact. So I guess we are almost out of time. Just to wrap up, are there any tools or resources that you would recommend for folks who are interested in learning about Vaadin and integrating your components and using them? Anything you want to share?
I think we have the best two links. The first is GitHub/Vaadin, and the second one is Vaadin/Elements. So if you are of the nerd/geek guy, then I would recommend that you go to the GitHub. You will find it very interesting for you. But if you want to go and see demos and working applications and see some visual stuff, then vaadin.com/elements is the way to go.
Awesome. Is there like an element with your face on it that's like doing a dance? I don't know. No. None of that.
I'll make sure to ask them for one. How about that?
All right, awesome. So is there anything that we missed today? Anything that you think that you would want people to know about Vaadin, except for all this praise that we were singing for the past 40 minutes? Anything else?
Yeah, I mean, we're pretty active on the community, as I said. Feel free to ping us on Twitter. I think you have my Twitter and the whole element people Twitter accounts. Also on Gitter and forums. Those are the best way to reach our experts. You will definitely get to hear from them sooner or later. This is, of course, not like our job to like answer all questions, but we make sure that we don't leave unanswered questions open for a long time. And especially the chat, we try to like respond to the community all the time. So feel free to ping us, tell us your feedback, tell us what doesn't work, give us your opinion, everything. We love to hear that all the time. We are never tired from hearing from the community.
Awesome. And how about community people who want to contribute back into Vaadin? Is it I'm assuming there's contributors all the time. Is there a good onboarding process for the contributing guide?
Yeah, we're actually having some interesting, nice contributor in our GitHub, and on all our GitHub pages, you're gonna find in the README part at the bottom of it contribution guidelines, how to contribute. So as far as I remember, there is some documents that you need to sign first so that you get access to contribute, and that's it. It's pretty simple and straightforward. You can start by a pull request, and then we will take it from there. You don't have to like really stress about it. We welcome all contributions, and who knows, maybe the best contributor will get a nice Vaadin t-shirt with this reindeer on it. No promises, though, I'm just saying.
Yeah, you've started a war for the t-shirts now. Yeah, now that we know what Vaadin means, so much more meaningful. So Amahdy, it was such a pleasure having you. You're so cool, and Vaadin is like even cooler. So thank you so much for coming on our show.
Thanks to you, and it's my pleasure to appear on this episode.
Yeah, it's really nice to hear a bit of a background story, particularly around the deer, and you walk us through some of the elements and stuff. So thank you very much for coming along.
Thank you, Leon.
And this has been episode number 144 of the Web Platform Podcast. Today we've been talking about Vaadin, UI components for web apps. We want to thank our guest Amahdy for coming on today. Amal, Danny, Amal, Leon. Danny's not present. We didn't argue about Shadow Dome today. We miss you, Danny. Amal, Leon, anything final before we sign off this week?
No, go check out Vaadin Elements.
Not from me.
Then let's wrap up 144. We hope you have a wonderful rest of the week, and we look forward to seeing you on our next episode.